Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Ventura County Planning Commission meeting of Thursday, May 7th, 2020. I know this is a new way for us to do Planning Commission meetings. I hope everybody has lots of patience to work with all of this. I'm optimistic that we'll get through this okay. To get the meeting going, I would like to have the clerk call the roll, please.
Commissioner White?
Here.
Commissioner Idukas? One more time, Commissioner Idukas? Okay.
We don't have your audio, Nora.
All right. No, I believe it's mine. Hold on. There we go. Can you try that one more time, Commissioner Idukas, please?
Here.
It's my fault. Thank you. Commissioner McPhail?
Here.
Commissioner King?
Here.
And Commissioner Rodriguez?
Here.
All right. Great.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Will you please join me? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay.
The next item on the agenda is public comments. This is time set aside for comments. Normally, we would have people here in the building registering their comments. The new procedure during these times is for comments to be submitted by email. And I will read the email address and information. If you have public comments, either in general or related to an item on the agenda that we're hearing, please email your comments no more than 250 words to planning.pccomments@ventura.org. Let me repeat that. Write this down if you intend to send in comments. planning.pccomments@ventura.org. And if you're commenting on a particular agenda item, please indicate in the subject line which agenda item it is. Please submit any public comments now, and the staff will read your comments. When we get to particular agenda items, and you might hear something in the presentations that causes you to want to make a comment, you will have another opportunity to send an email. Let me repeat the email one more time. planning.pccomments@ventura.org. The next item on the agenda, number 5, is the approval of the minutes for January 23rd, 2020. The recommended action is to approve them as presented. Is there a motion on the floor?
So moved. Second.
Commissioner King makes a motion. Who seconded?
Earl.
Commissioner McPhail seconded. Any discussion? The clerk will call the roll.
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Commissioner Idukas?
Aye.
Commissioner McPhail? Commissioner King,
Aye.
Commissioner Rodriguez.
Aye.
Okay, the minutes have been approved. The next item on the agenda, item 6, case number PL 19-0002, Pan American Seed Company in Santa Paula. The case planner is Justin Bertolini.
Good morning, everyone. Bear with me for a minute while I get the presentation pulled up here.
Justin, can I interrupt you a second?
Sure.
This is Phil again. I'm going to do something a little bit different than we normally do to enable commissioners to ask questions of staff during the presentation. If they so choose, I'm going to read the disclosure statement and ask each of you to make your disclosure statement. At this time, I would like to ask each planning commissioner to state on the record whether or not he or she has received any oral or written ex parte communication regarding this agenda item that is not already contained in the record before us on this matter. Please disclose the substance of that information only if that information is not contained in the record before us on this matter. Clerk would please ask each commissioner.
Right. Commissioner White,
I have no disclosures.
Commissioner Idukis,
No disclosures.
Commissioner McPhail,
No disclosures, but I think I need to make it clear that when I was the Ag Commissioner, I was the regulatory agency for Pan American Seed.
thank you. Commissioner King,
I have no disclosures.
Commissioner Rodriguez,
No disclosures.
thank you.
Okay, Justin, back to you.
Okay, thank you. So let me see if I could pull this up here. So is everyone seeing the PowerPoint presentation now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, good morning, Chair White and members of the Commission. My name is Justin Berteline, and I'm a planner with the RMA Planning Division. The item before you today is case number PL 19-0002. This item includes two requests. The first is for the approval of a conditional use permit for the modification of structures and continued operation of an existing seed and plant research facility. The second request is for the approval of a variance from the lot coverage requirements to allow the proposed development to exceed the 5% maximum lot coverage set forth in the NCZO and general plan to approximately 8%. I'd like to remind everyone participating in the hearing today to know that if you would like to submit public comments on this item, please do so at the address shown here. Please also indicate the agenda item in the subject line. The property is located at 335 South Briggs Road in the Santa Paula area of unincorporated Ventura County. The subject property has a general plan land use designation of agricultural and is zoned AE 40 acres. The 13-acre site is comprised of 2 legal lots and is currently developed with a seed research facility. It is bound by Briggs Road to the east, railroad tracks to the north, private property to the west, and Highway 126 and Faulkner Road, which is an abandoned road, to the south. The property was originally developed by the Burpee Seed Company in 1948 as a seed research and development facility. The site contained one steel frame Quonset hut, which served as a seed cleaning facility, administration office, warehouse, and a photography studio for catalogs. The facility and operations continued to grow, and in the 1970s, an administration building was added. In June of 1991, CUP 4677 was approved, which authorized the construction of additional greenhouses, shade houses, and agricultural support buildings. Modification to CUP 4677 was approved in February of 1992, which authorized the construction of additional greenhouses and extended the permit expiration date. This modification brought the lot coverage to its present amount of 7%. So as I mentioned, the item before you today includes the request for an approval of a CUP for the modification of structures and continued operation of an existing seed and plant research facility. It also includes the request to allow the proposed development to exceed the 5% maximum lot coverage to approximately 8%. This is the proposed site plan. All proposed development will be constructed in the footprint of the existing facilities. If approved, there will be no loss of agricultural crop production. The following few slides are renderings of what the proposed site would look like. This is a simulation of the administration building as viewed from Briggs Road looking north. And this is a view of the administration building and new parking area from Briggs Road looking south. This is the internal facilities and operation building. This building will house chemical and fertilizer mixing room, seed processing equipment, and photography area, and other things. And this is a view of the proposed courtyard, which will house the employee lunch and break room area. So the variance findings are described in section F of the staff report. They detail the applicant statements and staff determinations. The irregular shape of the lots, existing transportation easement, and development restriction, which is highlighted in yellow here, which runs over Faulkner Road. They place unique restraints on this property. The granting of the variance will not confer special privilege as related to surrounding properties, as the uses on the site remain consistent with the intent of the agricultural land use designation. This is the most current approved site plan. This was from modification 1 of CUP 4677, and this site plan this permit authorized the lot coverage to be at 7%. The proposed modification of these existing structures will increase the overall efficiency of the operation and not result in a loss of crop production area. So here's a breakdown of the lot coverage calculation. The site is 13 acres in size, and it is developed at 7% lot coverage, which equates to approximately 39,640 square feet. The applicant is proposing to remove approximately 21,000 square feet of existing structures and proposing to add an approximately 26,000 square feet of structures. The difference in there equals about 5,000 square feet of new structures. This calculation does not include greenhouses, hothouses, agricultural structures, as they are excluded from lot coverage calculation per the general plan. So as described in section E of the staff report, the request also includes the approval of a conditional use permit for the modification of these structures and continued operation of the seed research facility. This decision is typically made by the planning director. However, because your planning commission is the decision maker for the variance, the planning director has decided to defer that decision to your commission to consolidate the hearing process. Section E of the staff report details that this project is consistent with all general plan policies and the non-coastal zoning ordinance. There was an errata memo that was issued to your commission yesterday on May 6th. Commissioner King was kindly brought to my attention that the square footage figures and the conditions of approval were inconsistent with that of the staff report. This has since been corrected, and should your commission decide to approve the project, these changes will be incorporated into the final conditions of approval. Staff's recommended actions are included in section 8 of the staff report, and we ask that your commission take into consideration all testimony and evidence provided here today. I would again like to remind anyone who wishes to comment on this item, please do so at this address here, and please be reminded that you need to include the item agenda in the subject line of the email. So this concludes my presentation, and I'm available for any questions that you or your commission may have.
Do any of the commissioners have questions?
I have one question.
Commissioner King.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Perlin, for spending some time educating me yesterday. I'm left with one question I probably should have asked yesterday, and it relates to that greenhouse that's being demoed, which is not part of the square footage calculation for determining coverage. And the question is this, since they're demoing a greenhouse, which was an agricultural use, how is or what is replacing that agricultural use to ensure that there's no loss of agricultural application on the site?
Commissioner King, the applicant is proposing to remove that existing greenhouse and replace it with an outdoor growing area, similar to what was shown a few slides back. It's just they're just not having it under the greenhouse. They're having a different type of growing area.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Are there any further questions of commissioners of staff? Okay, hearing none, without objection, we'll open the public hearing. And the first item within the public hearing would be the presentation by the applicant.
Thank you.
And I would just ask that when you make your presentation, speak loudly so we can all hear clearly.
Thank you. This is Kyle Harris, the architect. Unless there are further questions, we believe that the presentation offered by Justin has covered everything we have to say.
Okay, no presentation by the applicant. All right, Justin, I guess you did a good job. Are there any questions by commissioners of the applicant? Okay, hearing none, it would be time now for us to solicit public comments. And if we could put up the screen again, the PowerPoint that has the email address. If you wish to make a comment on this case, please email your comments, no more than 250 words, to planning.pccomments@ventura.org. Without objection, we will take a 5-minute recess in order for the public to have an opportunity to send in email comments, which will subsequently be read to the full commission and the public. So we're entering a 5-minute recess. Okay, we're going to resume the public hearing. I'd like to get a report from staff as to whether we had any public comments come in by email.
No, Commissioner White, we have received no public comments.
Okay, we're notified that we have received, the staff has received no public comments. The next item would be for the another opportunity for the applicant to make any additional presentation that they would like to make. Does the applicant have anything further to say?
Thank you. This is Kyle Harris, the architect again. We appreciate everyone's being willing to look at our application today. We appreciate all the work that's gone into it, and I think it will make for a much improved work environment for Pan American Seed.
Okay, and then Justin, do you have any closing comments that you would like to make on this case?
Chair White, I have no additional comments this time.
Okay, so now we will close the public hearing and begin deliberations of the Planning Commission. Would any commissioners like to speak about this?
Commissioner White,
Commissioner Adukas.
I would just like to include the staff errata memo when I make the motion to follow the staff's recommendations.
Say again, you would like to?
Move approval of staff recommendations along with the inclusion of the errata memo.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Commissioner McPhail seconds. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I would ask the clerk to call the roll on the motion.
Commissioner White,
Aye.
Commissioner Idukas,
Aye.
Commissioner McPhail,
Aye.
Commissioner King,
Aye.
Commissioner Rodriguez.
Aye.
All right, hold on a second. Commissioner White, let me just put this up. There you go.
Okay, the motion has been approved. Item number 7 on the agenda, case number PL 19-0042, Ventura County Subdivision Ordinance is proposed to be repealed and reenacted to be consistent with the regulations of the State Subdivision Map Act, other applicable state laws, and the current standards and practices of the county. The staff person to make the presentation is Franca Rosengren.
Good morning, Commissioner or Chair White and Commissioners. Actually, Winston Wright will be the staff person presenting the project today.
Good morning. This is Winston Wright from the from Planning Division. Excuse me. I was getting ready to present when this quickly came to my item. So, thank you very much for hearing me out. Good morning, Chairman White, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Winston Wright, and I'm a manager for the Planning Division. I am also the project lead for the proposed repeal and reenactment of the Ventura County Subdivision Ordinance. I would be negligent if I did not credit those who assisted with this project leading up to this, including a retired executive officer of Ventura County Local Formation Commission, Kim Ulick, retired County Counsel, Linda Ash, retired County Surveyor, Wayne Battleson, Franca Rosengren, who you've already heard from, Jeffrey Barnes of County Council, and Francesca Verdon of County Council. While drafting the ordinance, the Planning Division also sought and accept guidance from numerous other county agencies, including licensed surveyors, property owners, and land trusts. Over the years of working with the ordinance, staff and the planning director retained suggested revisions to the ordinance, and all those suggestions from those groups and individuals have been considered while preparing the proposed ordinance, and many were incorporated into the text. For those in the public who are interested in making comment on this item, please email your comments, 250 words or less, to planning.pccomments@ventura.org. Please indicate the subject line as agenda item number 7. Staff will read your comment to the planning commission.
I would just point out that it's agenda item 7, not agenda item 6.
Yes, thank you for that. The topics for today's hearing are the goals and objectives of this repeal and reenactment, a little bit of background, discussion of the subdivision, what subdivisions are in the Subdivision Map Act, the common application types, the updates that occurred to each of the articles in the ordinance, the CEQA exemption that we'll be utilizing, the public comments that we received, and staff's recommended actions. The goals of this repeal and reenactment are to achieve consistency and compliance with the Subdivision Map Act, provide greater clarity for staff, customers, and decision makers, codify long-standing legal interpretation and administrative processes, ensure consistent implementation of the general plan policy, area plan policies, and other related laws, identify and correct typographical and grammatical errors and outdated references, and accurately reflect the current standards and practices in processing ministerial and discretionary subdivision applications. The historical background, the subdivision ordinance was first adopted in 1943. It's been fairly consistent in its standards as it relates to requiring safe access, safe building pads for each resulting lot in terms of geologic hazards and flooding, as well as certain design requirements and most importantly, services such as septic, sewer, and water. It was substantial changes occurred in the 1960s and the 80s, though no changes have really been, significant changes have been made since then, last being updated in the 2011 housing cycle. A subdivision means the division by any subdivider of any units of improved or unimproved contiguous land. So essentially, it's the division of land by a subdivider for present, future sale, lease, or finance. Hold on one second here. I'm having difficulty with the, there we go. The Subdivision Map Act is the primary regulation governing the creation, consolidation, and extinguishing of lots in California. It provides the authority to regulate and manage the design and improvements of subdivisions through maps. And every city and county within California must adopt an ordinance to regulate and control subdivisions, where the Map Act specifically requires a tentative and final or a parcel map. The county may choose to regulate other subdivisions where the Map Act is silent. The county regulates its land use, density, and improvements through the general plan, specific plan, and the zoning ordinance, and various other health and safety regulations that pertain to development. So the subdivision ordinance itself does not have many of these policies, but incorporates them by reference. And of course, any project that comes through any discretionary subdivision would also need to be consistent with CEQA. So Article 1 was revised and reorganized, and definitions were moved to Article 2, and the map exclusions were consolidated into this article and updated to reference the applicable California Government Code. So this section in the authority speaks to the county's ability to regulate the various types of maps listed there. It also lists the exclusions from the Map Act, including leasing of existing existing apartments or commercial spaces, leased for land for agricultural purposes, oil and gas, telecommunications, and so forth. I have a separate slide if the Planning Commission would like to go over those exclusions individually. Article 2, definitions were removed out of Article 1 and were placed in their own individual article. The words that govern the ordinance. We relied on existing definitions in state law and in other ordinances at the county. And if the reference law changes, so does our definition goes along with it. So the italicized words also remain in the text. If a word was left out of the definition, it's in the Map Act or in the Ventura County Ordinance somewhere else, then those definitions would apply. Article 3 is a new article. It covers the application and processing of fees, clarifies billing practices, and it does not address impact fees. I want to make it clear that no fees were added to the subdivision ordinance. So Article 4 was reorganized quite a bit, and several items were brought out of the Parcel Map Waiver article and into their own section and article. Lot line adjustments, mergers, lot elimination, subdivision, conservation subdivision,
Mr. Wright?
lot subdivision. Yes.
Mr. Wright, may I interrupt you?
Yes.
I'm getting a reverberation on my end. Is anyone else getting a reverberation?
I am. And also the last sentence or two, he really broke up.
I think someone might have been walking by with a cell phone. Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Okay, I think the cell phone reception impacted that. So I apologize.
Not your fault.
Article 4, now we're reverberating again.
Yes.
Let me try turning off other devices.
Okay, this is the chairman. We're going to take a 3-minute recess to address this technical issue. Please hold on. Thank you.
Can you hear me now? Reverb.
No, I think it stopped.
Verb started. Thank you. When we start.
Hello? Should we?
Okay, we're going to resume now. Would you please go back a slide or two and repeat, and let's see how this goes.
Mr. Chair, this is Nora. I don't see Earl McPhail. No, I do. Okay.
Bio break.
Winston, you going to continue?
Yes, so you ready? Okay. So going back to Article 3, I went back one slide before when we were having difficulty with the sound. So I've retreated back to Article 3. This article covers fees and charges and covers the application and processing fees, clarifies current billing practices. I want to emphasize that no new fees were added, and these fees are processing fees, not those related to impact fees. Parcel map waivers were provided their own article. Local jurisdictions must adopt a ordinance, or excuse me, a section related to parcel map waivers. We have done that here for environmental subdivisions and mobile home park conversions to residential ownership as required by, and the mobile home park conversions to residential ownership are required by the Map Act to be a map waiver under certain circumstances. And the procedures for both of these types of subdivisions is detailed in the Map Act, which is referenced directly in the ordinance. Lot line adjustment, mergers, lot elimination subdivisions, conservation subdivisions, and large lot subdivisions no longer are listed as map waivers. The planning director has been designated as the decision maker or advisory agency, and the findings for approval comply with the Subdivision Map Act. In addition, expiration dates were clarified, noting that parcel map waivers would expire in the same time frame as tentative maps, and our recordation process is clarified. I want to make a point here about parcel map waivers. Parcel map waivers are processed like tentative maps, so there's still conditions tied to them. But at the end of the tentative phase, when they go to record, they're effectuated by legal descriptions rather than a field survey, monumentations, and a final map. So the parcel map step is waived. Article 5 was revised. It consolidated submission requirements, the design requirements, and processing of tentative maps in a single article. It describes the difference between a tentative tract map versus a tentative parcel map. In general, a tentative parcel map is 4 or fewer parcels. However, there are exceptions that would allow other types of subdivisions to be processed as a tentative parcel map, including what was called previously a large lot subdivision. So even if you had, say, 10 40-acre parcels, instead of processing a tentative tract map, you could still process a tentative parcel map for those large parcels over a certain size. And the types of maps that would qualify for a tentative parcel map are listed in 8205-0, excuse me. So we worked on, most importantly in this section, the information to be shown on a tentative maps, worked with the various agencies that review and approve maps and asked their advice on what they would need on the maps. That was updated. In addition to the documents to be submitted, such as water availability, geotechnical reports, maps, site plans showing topography and so forth. The general lot and map design requirements were not substantially changed. There were exceptions for buildable sites that were clarified, such as maps that would facilitate, say, mining, where a building site would not be required.
Mr. Chair. Commissioner White.
This Commissioner Dukas.
I'm getting some kind of room noise. I don't know whose mic is on, but I'm hearing other voices competing with Mr. Wright's.
Does everybody have his microphone muted? Except when you're speaking?
I'm sorry to keep interrupting, Winston.
That's okay, I understand.
Okay, it sounds like we've got that corrected.
Please continue, Winston.
Okay. So again, the tentative map section, Article 5 was updated. And within the tentative map section, there's discussions on what the various other ordinances in the county a map must comply with. And here's a list of those standards. As you can see, it's quite extensive. So the Map Act, the subdivision ordinance doesn't stand by itself. It's reinforced by the other Ventura County codes that are related to development and subdivisions. So the tentative maps, Article 5 was also updated to clarify the filing, processing, and approval, including the findings. Planning Commission is the advisory agency, initial advisory agency for tentative tract maps, and the board supervisor is the decision maker or the advisory agency for the tract maps. The planning director is the advisory agency for tentative parcel maps. We also updated the findings to include new requirements related to projects with subdivisions within areas of state responsibility and very high fire hazard severity zones. The expiration and extensions were updated to be consistent with the Subdivision Map Act. There was work done on the vesting tentative maps to clarify how those would be handled in the county to make them consistent with the Map Act requirements. And we also added corrections to approved tentative maps. These would be reviewed and approved without a public hearing by the planning director. There'd be stricter findings of approval. And these corrections were added to avoid unnecessary hearings. Final and parcel map requirements. We worked closely with the county surveyor on this article, and no substantial changes were made to that other than bringing the article into compliance with current practices. We did clarify that the county surveyor approves parcel maps and accepts and rejects offers of dedication. It read that the public works director did that previously. We also allowed and created a section on amending the recorded final maps. This is used to require going back to the Board of Supervisors. But there were instances where it came up that seemed that were relatively insignificant changes it requested, such as conditions of approval. The planning director has designated the advisory agency for these types of amendments, and again, to avoid unnecessary board hearings. The planning director must adhere to pretty strict standards and findings to approve these amendments. Improvements, dedication, reservations, and fees. This is incorporating process for accepting and releasing monument securities were added. The Quimby ordinance was updated to better reflect California law. The Quimby ordinance is a fee allowed by state law to provide parkland for subdivisions or by the demand that's created by subdivisions. So we clarified the formula necessary to collect those fees. And it was updated also to reflect the most federal census numbers. And as the census is updated, the formula is updated. Lot line adjustments received their own article. This is probably the most common, or is the most common request in Ventura County. We get approximately 15 so a year. We've approved about 80 of them over the last 7 years. The article includes filing and processing and the standards of approval, designated the planning director as the advisory agency, and clarifies the recordation process for these types of mapping actions. So the current standard, there's been a desire to change this for some time, both by the customers and staff. The current regulations would prevent non-conforming parcels from becoming conforming in certain circumstances with no exceptions. and the smallest non-conforming size parcel could become even smaller. So that underlined section right there is the section that seems to be problematic. And that is, the current language reads, no conforming lot will be made non-conforming with the applicable zoning requirements. That remains the same. And the adjustment will not reduce the aggregate area of all affected lots which do not meet the minimum area requirements for their zoning designation.
Excuse me,
That's
Winston.
the problem.
Winston, can you hold on a second? We have a question from Commissioner Adukas. Go ahead.
It's starting to break up again. I'm getting complete reverberation, and this part is pretty important.
Can you hear me now? Am I reverberating?
No, you're perfect. Is anyone else getting reverberation? I'm wondering if it's on my end.
No, I was getting the same thing, Nora.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to take another
Right, well,
few-minute
I'll
pause
forward
to
ahead,
try to troubleshoot this issue. Please hold on. Thank you.
were you speaking about the majority of the comments, the public comments?
Parcels. Yes, I will get that to the earlier. Are we on, or we're not?
Hi,
Still
everyone.
not
We're
live,
going to go
correct?
ahead and commence the meeting. I'm going to turn over to Commissioner White. Commissioner White.
Okay, we're going to resume the meeting. Winston, could you please back up one slide and continue? Thank you.
Okay, well, sorry for the interruption. We were talking about lot line adjustments. Lot line adjustments are boundary line adjustments between 4 or fewer existing adjoining legal lots, where the land taken from one lot is added to another adjoining lot, and where a greater number of lots than originally existed is not thereby created. So this is a new standalone article. We do approximately 15 lot line adjustments a year. It's our most common application in Ventura County. The existing standards of approval have been problematic in that the current language does not allow non-conforming parcels from becoming conforming in certain circumstances. It's a lot of flexibility in the way the language is currently written, and there continues to be a lot of flexibility in the proposed language. The proposed standards for approval: 4 or fewer adjoining legal lots can be involved. You can't create additional lots through a lot line adjustment, though you can reduce the number. So it could start with 4 and end with 3, for instance. The resulting property lines shall be coterminous with the boundaries of a city or county. We run into that now and then. We've had to deal with that in Moorpark and Ventura and the city of Oxnard. So this is a good remedy for situations where property lines cross city boundaries. No lot that conforms to the minimum lot size of the zone shall become non-conforming. That is retained. And then all lots shall conform to objective standards and requirements of the general plan, zoning ordinance, and Ventura County improvement standards of the specifications. Essentially, these requests are all ministerial. Lot line adjustments are not a discretionary action, though they still need to meet the specifications of the ordinances. Exception to the lot size has been added to the lot line adjustment. Again, no lot that is conforming shall be rendered non-conforming, and the lot line adjustment shall not cause any existing non-conforming lot to become smaller than the smallest non-conforming lot involved. This is a standard that was adopted to prevent non-conforming parcels from becoming even further non-conforming. That's not the case. That there are exceptions to that. You can transfer land in between non-conforming lots to another non-conforming lot to make the latter non-conforming lot conforming to the minimum lot size now, so long as a non-conforming lot is made smaller, remains at least 10 acres in size. And any non-conforming lot that is made conforming as to size by the lot line adjustment shall not be made large enough to be eligible for further subdivision. So here's a situation where quite often you have both lots are conforming, and there's an even swap of land for good reason, where you've got a road or a creek bifurcating an agricultural area, and the farmer just finds it easier to work on land that he does not need to cross a creek for. So this is conforming to conforming. I'm reverberating again at my end. You having problems with my audio?
Yes, you're reverberating.
I'm not sure what's going on because I'm in the same room as the previous presenter and no other devices are turned on in here. So I'll continue. Let me know if it gets too difficult to understand me. So here's a situation where there's a non-conforming parcels adjusting with another non-conforming parcel, but the lot, the smallest one becomes larger in this instance. We can continue to entertain these types of lot line adjustments.
Okay, this is the chair. I'm notified we need to take a break here to correct something. Okay, thank you for your patience. We're going to resume now. We have Commissioner Adukas reconnected, and hopefully the audio gets better. Winston, would you please continue? Maybe you want to drop back one slide to make sure. And if anybody has trouble hearing, we can ask Winston to repeat a sentence or a comment that he made.
Okay, so I'm going to backtrack one slide here. Everybody see that there? So going back to the types of lot line adjustments that can be approved, here's a situation where an adjoining lot is transferring an equal amount of land from one parcel to the next. So 1 acre is being transferred from A to B and vice versa. So they retain their conforming lot size standard. Here's a situation where it can be approved and not conforming to non-conforming, where the smallest has become larger. So the smallest non-conforming parcel is becoming 2 acres larger. In this case, for the 40-acre minimum lot size requirement, it could be approved. This was provided to show that non-conforming lots could convey land between one another to create a conforming lot, as long as the smallest lot involved does not become, any of the lots do not become smaller than the smallest lot involved. So there's a couple of two lots here that transfer land to parcel A to make it conforming in size at 40 acres. And they retain their 8-acre minimum size. And this is the exception that was built in to allow smaller lots to become even smaller, as long as they retain at least 10 acres when they are creating conforming lots through the lot line adjustment. So this is a situation that could not be entertained before, and that 10-acre minimum exception has been built into the ordinance. So these are lot line adjustments that could not be approved. In this situation, we're in the AE40 zone, a 40-acre minimum, and A is the smallest lot involved. It becomes smaller than 10 acres and is less than the minimum lot size. This could not be approved. This could not be approved previously as well. It's just for clarifying. And here is a situation where a lot line adjustment between non-conforming parcels are making a non-conforming parcel large enough to subdivide. So this could not be approved. Although they're all reduced to a smaller size, they're smaller than the smallest involved, and the lot line adjustment results in the ability to subdivide this parcel D. So that concludes the presentation on lot line adjustments. I'm sure there will be questions, but moving on. Article 10 is a new article on voluntary mergers. Merger is the joining of 2 or more contiguous lots under one ownership. The application processing and approval standards and recordation requirements are included in the article. One solution that was added to fix or remediate an illegal lot, if a property owner is able to merge back the illegal lot to its original configuration, that would remediate the illegal lot, and the property would qualify for a certificate of compliance and could be developed. So this is a new solution that was been added to the ordinance. If you could bring back Humpty Dumpty, then the lot to its whole size, then you could fix an illegal lot situation. Article 11 is a new article related to conservation subdivisions. We have a conservation subdivision and allowance in our ordinance now. This is one of those set types of subdivisions the Map Act allows us to entertain that are not mandated. It It currently allows the conservations for parcels for biotic resources, but it will be expanded to allow conservation parcels for a wider array of resources, including historic, biological, scenic, recreation, and grazing. Essentially, any land trust promoting the preservation of these resources can be involved in a conservation subdivision. Changes to this section include the parcel does not need to be legal to begin with. The conservation parcel that won't be developed does not require a field survey or monumentation. And this is a point that was requested by the public during the public comment period. If the lot wouldn't be developed, a couple of consultants asked that why would it need field survey and monumentation, and we agreed and changed the ordinance to reflect that. A conservation parcel must be deeded to a natural resource agency or a conservation organization. Both of those terms are defined. A conservation organization is essentially a land trust, and one organization that's able to receive land as gifts for tax write-offs under the Internal Revenue Service Code. Non-conservation parcels still are required to have a field survey and monumentation. A non-conservation parcel is a parcel that could have a homestead on it and could be developed. Reversions to acreage. This is a new article, and it's straight out of the Map Act. This is the essential erasing of an approved subdivision, taking it back to the undivided land that it was previously. Here's another section that's straight out of the Subdivision Map Act, the mobile home park conversions to resident ownership. This is an article was created, and here's an example of that. This is Wagon Wheel, and you can see that item number 2 was a mobile home park. They included affordable housing as part of their project. So there's certain conditions that would be needed to be met to do a mobile home park conversion to resident ownership or another use. And those provisions are set forth in the government code, as well as the planning division has a mobile home park closure ordinance. Both of those ordinances would need to, and the government code would need to be followed. Certificates of compliance and conditional certificate of compliance are a new article. And a certificate of compliance allows the formal review of a lot to determine whether it complies with the provisions of the subdivision map laws. And a conditional certificate of compliance is if a lot is determined to be illegal, then a conditional certificate of compliance can be issued certifying the lot is legal. However, development of a lot may be subject to the satisfaction of certain conditions, including potentially the adding additional land before the lot can be developed through a lot line adjustment or other means. Maps, Article 4 identifies the types of instruments that constitute a certificate of compliance, like a parcel map or a lot line adjustment. Also, lots that are entitled to the issuance of a certificate of compliance based on development that may have been approved on those lots previously. And it talks about the types of lots or the type of development that would not certify a property for, or would not receive a certificate of compliance. Article 15 is the notices and hearings and decision section. This is all the procedures were combined into a single article. The appeals article is new. It designated the appeals board. It established the noticing and setting of public hearings, how decisions would be issued, and we made sure it was consistent with California law and other county ordinances. The enforcement article is new. It identifies violations of map conditions as grounds for enforcement actions. It clarifies the enforcement process for illegal subdivisions. Clarifies that no permits will be issued on illegal lots, which is already the case. And clarifies the enforcement procedures in our, will also apply to the violation of subdivision ordinance, excuse me. The enforcement procedures in the non-coastal zoning ordinance will also apply to the violation of subdivision ordinance. And amendments to the VCZ Ventura County subdivision ordinance. This is entirely a new article. It added procedures for amending the subdivision ordinance consistent with California law and other county ordinances. While preparing this document, we had public review and comments. We bring it to the Planning Commission. It will next go to the Board of Supervisors for approval and adoption. And then there are post-adoption tasks, such as putting it on, getting the ordinance up and codified. We work closely with the County Surveyor's Office, Engineering Services and Public Works, Fire Protection District, Ventura County Parks, among others. There was a technical work session with local surveyors and related technical professionals. We took comments from that. We discussed why large lot subdivisions were removed from the list of qualifying parcel maps. It was understood why we removed large lot subdivisions and added them as tentative parcel maps instead of map waivers. And then there were suggestions regarding allowing lot line adjustments that allow non-conforming lots to become even smaller. And I think we discussed that the idea would be that we're not going to make a non-conforming situation even worse. But that staff has evaluated this project, the repeal and reenactment, and has determined that it qualifies for 2 CEQA exemptions. Section 15061 B3, the activity is covered by the general rule that only projects which have the potential for causing a significant effect on the environment. So it's been determined that no unusual circumstances occurred. So we've also taken the steps to add section 15308. And this is related to the conservation subdivision. And this allows local agency to adopt a local ordinance for the maintenance and restoration, enhancement, or protection of the environment, where the regulatory processes involve procedures for the protections of the environment. The public health and safety general, it's been findings for, the findings for approval, no public health and safety general would be impacted. The proposed amendments is in keeping with the express purpose of the county subdivision ordinance to implement the county's general plan in conformance with the Subdivision Map Act. So staff's findings for the supporting this can be found in section C of the staff report. The public notice included a 1/8 page ad in the Ventura County Star. We notified interested parties. We posted the planning website and notified all 10 cities. During the workshop, we received verbal comments and concerns about the lot line adjustments and conservation subdivisions and have incorporated some of those. We also received written comments. And most recently, last night, we received a written comment or letter from the Ventura Land Trust, and they had some suggestions that will be discussed. So staff asks that the commission certify it has reviewed and considered the staff report and all exhibits and has considered all comments received during the public comments and hearing process and adopt the resolution, certify. And I'm not sure if you want me to read each one of these items here, but here's the recommended actions.
I don't think it's necessary to read all those.
Okay. So I'll leave it open for questions. One thing that came up, and I apologize, I should have hit this during the presentation. Last night, Commissioner King highlighted a point in the conservation subdivision section on the applicability. I'm going to escape out of here and get to that point real quick, if that's okay with the board. So in Article 11, Commissioner King highlighted that in applicability section 8211-1B, that the conservation subdivision may be created when an existing lot is either divided into 2 or more conservation parcels or divided into 2 or more conservation parcels and 1 non-conservation parcel. That should read divided into 1 or more conservation parcels and 1 non-conservation parcels. So I hope that this is a solution to what Commissioner King highlighted. Such as this is an edit I would request be added to the action.
Good catch.
You know, even a blind squirrel eats once a year.
Okay, commissioners, do you have questions of staff? Go ahead, Commissioner McPhail.
Yeah, on Article 8, would you explain to me the Quimby thing one more time?
Okay, I apologize. Quimby fee is a impact fee that's in the Subdivision Map Act that allows local jurisdictions to collect fees from subdividers under certain circumstances. In Ventura County, it's generally on parcels when there's more than 5 parcels created. And the formula is based on household number. Let me get to that section specifically. It's a formula that takes into consideration the number of lots that will be created and dwellings that will be created, and the census numbers for the number of people in those homes to purchase a certain amount of land or to create a park.
Okay. My next question under Article 11, why must a landowner transfer to a land trust or conservation organization if it's grazing land?
The conservation organization would establish an easement or some other document that would assure that the conservation parcel would be maintained and it's for conservation purposes.
I understand that, but that would be taking the landowner's right away to use it for grazing land, right?
Not necessarily. There would be provisions in the conservation easement with the conservation organization that would allow grazing under certain circumstances and the means of grazing. It wouldn't necessarily allow development of grazing land with barns and so forth, but it would allow corrals and fencing. So the property owner would grant an easement or grant the land to the conservation organization and could continue to graze that land.
As long as the conservation district determined that they liked it. But after that, he could be thrown out and with no recourse.
The farmer or ranch, these are laws that are established by the Internal Revenue Code for land trusts. So a farmer or a cattleman would voluntarily engage in this request to get a tax benefit or to just allow the property to be left in a certain state, an open space state for grazing in perpetuity. And he could potentially create a homestead that would be smaller than minimum lot size. That would be the benefit of this, and then receive the sale to the conservation organization while continuing to be able to graze. The terms of how the land would be grazed would be in the legal agreement between the land trust and the property owner. It's a voluntary. This is not mandatory. This is a voluntary request, and the farmer and the grazer and the cattleman is getting a benefit.
Okay. With that said, I'll have to admit that this is the first I've seen all this because I wasn't able to access it earlier. So could there be a sentence added there that this is voluntary? Because the way I read it, it sounds like it's mandatory.
All tentative maps and final maps are voluntary actions that have to have the approval of every property owner or fee interest entity that has any interest in the land. So it's a voluntary request to begin with.
Okay, that clarifies it.
Do any
Thank you,
other,
Winston.
excuse me, do any other
I have a-
commissioners have questions? Commissioner Idukis?
Yes. Yes, thank you. I have not had a chance to review the communication from, did you say it was Ventura Land Trust?
Yes, we received that late last night, and we can provide that to you during the break and can respond to their comments.
Okay, it was sent to the device that I'm using to be in the Zoom meeting, and I haven't figured out how to do a split screen. So I haven't been able to, and it's not on the Ventura.org site yet for the public to see it.
I have taken an excerpt. Can you see this?
I can see your screen.
So we will provide the letter. The letter is in support of the ordinance. There is one suggestion. The Ventura Land Trust, and I would like to share that letter because they have been trying to engage in a conservation subdivision for approximately 2,000 acres above Ventura. And this ordinance amendment will allow that to occur because it's in a legal lot to begin with. So they're going to acquire that property. And so the letter is pertinent to the discussion. At the end of the letter, there is a suggestion that the ordinance be amended to allow corrals and fencing in all conservation parcels. And we have to prepare a response to that because we believe it's appropriate, obviously, in grazing and farming conservation parcels and potentially open space parcels for recreation, but not necessarily appropriate for biological conservation parcels that are created for biological preservation.
Just so that we can clarify this communication that came in from the Ventura Land Trust, I would like Megan to please read the letter so that it's part of the public record and available to people who are listening into this hearing. Go ahead.
It was dated May 6, 2020. I received it last night at 10:45 p.m. The letter states, "Dear Planning Commissioners, I am writing on behalf of Ventura Land Trust to comment positively on 3 aspects of the proposed subdivision ordinance being considered at your meeting of May 7, 2020, Agenda Item 7. We also have a suggested revision to one section. Ventura Land Trust has experience with the conservation subdivision provisions of the existing ordinance, and based on that experience, I am writing to convey our support for 3 changes being made in the proposed ordinance as compared to the existing one. 1, expanding the list of allowable resources to be conserved, to include property with values that are historic, biological, scenic, recreational, and useful for grazing. Number 2, removing the requirement that the parent parcel or parcels for a conservation subdivision be legal lots. And 3, waiving the field survey requirement for conservation parcels. Number one, they are, just a side note, in this letter, it looks like they're expanding on those three particular points. So on the first point, expanded lot of conservation purposes, Ventura Land Trust mission is to permanently protect the land, water, wildlife, and scenic beauty of the Ventura region for current and future generations. Ventura Land Trust believes that preserving open space and providing public access enhances the economy, quality of life, and public well-being of our region. The definition of conservation purposes in proposed section 8202-0, including land with historic, scenic, or recreational values, or useful for grazing, as well as biological important land, more amply encompasses Ventura Land Trust mission and goals than the existing ordinance, and we endorse it. Item number 2, which is the parent parcel, may be an illegal parcel. Ventura Land Trust is presently engaged in acquisition of a 2,100-acre ranch where only one small part of the ranch is a legal lot. The rest is illegal remaining parcels. This not uncommon situation prevented us from using the existing conservation subdivision ordinance to facilitate the acquisition, substantially complicating and delaying the transaction. Proposed section 8211-1 applicability in referring to an existing lot rather than existing legal lot would be very helpful in overcoming this problem, and we endorse it. The conservation subdivision process itself will yield legal lots, thereby correcting the initial parent parcel problem. Number 3, no field survey for conservation parcels. We appreciate the provision in section 8211-2.1c that field surveys are not required for conservation parcels. While conservation properties come in all sizes and types, larger acreages, for example, over 1,000 acres, historically used for ranching, are not unusual. These larger properties often have been held in the same family for generations, with the result that they have not been previously surveyed in detail. The survey details have been lost to time, or prior surveys do not meet modern standards. In our experience, these larger properties also usually have steep topography, making a ground survey challenging and expensive. Waiving a field survey for conservation parcels facilities conservation while protecting the public welfare through the field survey requirement for the non-conservation parcel. We also would like to call your attention to section 8211-6C, recordation, which as drafted specifies that corrals and fencing may be allowed when associated with farmland and grazing ranch land conservation parcels. Emphasis in original removed. This sentence could be interpreted to mean that corrals and fencing would be allowed only on farmland and rangeland conservation parcels and not on any other types of conservation parcels. With respect to the corrals, if a conservation organization proposes to allow horseback riding on an open space preserve, this section would be construed as preventing the construction of corrals to manage that equestrian use. More importantly, this section could be construed as preventing organizations managing conservation property not intended for farming or ranch land conservation for constructing needed security fencing or fencing to prevent livestock on adjacent property from entering the conservation property. We suggest revising the above quoted sentence to read, corrals and fencing are allowed on conservation parcels. Thank you for your consideration of our comments on the proposed subdivision ordinance revision. If you have any questions, please contact Brooke Ashworth. Sincerely, Derek Pulteney, the Executive Director. End of letter.
Okay, thank you, Megan. Are there any other questions by commissioners of staff on this matter?
Yes, I'd like to follow up on the
Commissioner
differences
Idukas.
between. Thank you. I'd like to follow up and ask Mr. Wright if he could respond to the differences between what is being proposed and what they are asking for. You're muted.
Excuse me. So currently the ordinance only allows conservation parcels to start with a legal lot. So they are dealing with a situation with over 2,000 acres of an illegal subdivision above Foothill, above the city of Ventura. They've been trying to acquire that property for some time, and they've been looking into mapping solutions before they purchase it because they didn't want to buy an illegal lot without knowing they could resolve the problem they had with using it. So that's one issue that's been resolved. You can start with an illegal lot. The other point that they're trying to highlight is
Just to clarify, what's being proposed today does allow for that?
yes,
Okay.
you can start with an illegal lot, and like a normal tentative map, you could solve the illegal subdivision through a tentative map, and in this case, it would be a conservation subdivision.
And then some of their other suggestions, it sounded like what's being proposed already encompasses it with regard to large parcels that have steep terrain and therefore are difficult to survey.
Correct. That was a point that we took into consideration during our public comment period. It was suggested that the field survey be removed from conservation parcels because those lots would not be developed generally. And staff agreed, and we consulted with the surveyor's office, and they agreed there's little risk associated with not doing a field survey and monumentation for those parcels.
And then one of the other things that pricked up my ears was the point that Commissioner McPhail also, I think, referred to with regard to grazing and necessary fencing and other structures. Is there a difference between what they're recommending and what is being proposed?
Currently, crop production and grazing activities are only allowed on conservation parcels when the conservation purpose is for the preservation of farmland and/or grazing and rangeland resources. Corrals and fencings. Oh, sorry. Hold on one moment. My screen went blank. Corral, so may be allowed when associated with farmland and grazeland conservation parcels. They would like to allow the fencing and corrals on all conservation parcels. Staff would like to take that into consideration and with Planning Commission's direction, determine which types of conservation parcels would be appropriate to have corrals and fencing, and highlight that this is not intended to prevent perimeter fencing, just interior fencing, and we would add a provision in the ordinance to allow perimeter fencing for protective reasons. But grazing and corrals on certain types of conservation parcels may not be appropriate, such as conservation parcels for the purposes of preserving biological or biotic resources. So we agree that we would be open to and agree that allowing corrals and fences on open space parcels created for recreational purposes could be considered, and agree that we should amend that language, but do not have the language to present to you today.
What about the grazing conservation?
They, of course, would allow corrals and fences, not buildings per se, but the uses and buildings that would be allowed would be established through the easement or agreement there with the conservation organization. So there's some flexibility already in the ordinance. Corrals and fencings are explicitly allowed for grazing and agricultural properties. So
for our purposes, if we wanted to forward this and the next step, we would have to be pretty vague.
That we will take in consideration and make certain amendments that are appropriate for the type of land conservation parcel that's being created.
Would it be better for them to just come back before the Board of Supervisors so that this could be given the attention it's due?
You mean work directly with the Ventura Land Trust?
And have them make this request of the board instead of trying to hurry something along that we haven't really given a lot of attention to.
Yes,
at the Planning Commission level.
That would be my recommendation, and I would definitely work on drafting the language ahead of time so that there was an agreement.
Yeah, this is I appreciate that. And Earl, your mic is not on. I keep on seeing you wave.
I have a little problem with just drafting language for the board to approve without us seeing it first. I understand why this item is on the agenda, don't get me wrong. But I do have a problem with somebody sending in a letter at 10 something at night expecting us to adopt whatever in that letter. My proposal would be to bring this back next week with whatever language Mr. Wright comes up with, because I can't vote in favor of this thing without knowing exactly what all the language is going to be. That's just my opinion.
Well, I don't agree with you in terms of coming back next week. I was thinking that this group could directly deal with the board and that we would not try to rush something through or have a placeholder for this, that they could work through the board just as effectively.
Well, but
Chair White.
There are members of the board that don't have any agricultural background whatsoever. And that's my problem, is that maybe adopt most of it except for that section until next week or whatever, but I can't vote in favor of it unless I see what the language is, because I'm concerned about the Ventura Conservancy getting some things that right now without the language I'm not comfortable with.
But
okay, I'm being paged here by Director Ward. Go ahead.
Yes, Chair White, Commissioners, Planning Director Ward. Possibly what we can provide is for the consideration of the perimeter fencing component as one issue that was raised, and staff has indicated that that is something supportive and makes sense to include in the ordinance. And if that concept of allowing perimeter fencing is amenable to the commission, that could be directed in part of your motion. Secondly, there was the concern of certain conservation parcels that are trying to protect sensitive habitats and resources. And if ensuring that corrals and horse uses in those sensitive areas is also something that the commission feels, yes, those should be excluded since it's trying to protect biological resources, and that concept is amenable to the commission, possibly that could be included in your motion. And then your last point about horse properties and grazing properties, if you have a directive on how you would like that addressed, to pose that into your motion. What I'm suggesting is that if the concepts are supportive, staff can write and prepare the language as we take that forward to the board and show that we are addressing your recommendations.
Okay, thank you. I have a question for you, Winston. In speaking with a resident of my district yesterday, there was concern expressed about public input in the process of lot line adjustments, and mergers. And I'm not sure that I understand it correctly, but the concern expressed to me was that presently a person has rights to be notified of a lot line adjustment or a merger in the neighborhood and would thereby have an opportunity to express an opinion about that. And the concern expressed to me yesterday was that this has become, in the new language of the ordinance, ministerial decision-making where it used to be discretionary, and that there are no appeals from the public. Would you comment on those concerns?
Certainly. Let me see here if I can get make sure is my mic on?
Yes.
Sorry for that. So this is one of the items that was the Parcel Map Waiver section that currently is in the ordinance is unclear on the lot line adjustment by Subdivision Map Act requirements and through case law is a ministerial action, and the county has not notified neighbors of lot line adjustments for over a decade. There were discretionary lot line adjustments processed approximately 10 to 12 years ago under certain circumstances where development standards that couldn't be made. But it's been determined through case law and through the MAP Act that all lot line adjustments, unless they're being processed along with another discretionary action, are in and of themselves a ministerial action that do not require or necessitate the notice of a public notice. So they're already ministerial.
Excuse me, what about appeals?
Appeals are not noticed, but if any of the parties that are aware of it, or if someone was made aware of it, that there was an appeal period. I need to look at that real quick. Francesca, is that coming to mind, or County Council, or?
Francesca's mic is not.
Keeps blacking out here, sorry.
Yes, my apologies. This is Francesca Verdine, County Council, and appeals are addressed in their own article, Article 16, I believe. And so appeals have to be filed within 10 calendar days after the action. So lot line adjustment appeals, decisions relating to lot line adjustments would be subject to that article.
And so the answer to my question, or actually the resident of the Ojai area, is that they are appealable on a decision, a ministerial decision on a lot line adjustment or merger? Either Winston or Francesca could answer that.
I need to consult with Francesca really quickly. 8209-6 in the lot line adjustment, the last section, effective date of lot line adjustment is upon recordation of a lot line adjustment. We do a tentative approval, so there's an approval first and then there's a recordation to follows. The appeal process would have to be immediately after and before the recordation. So yes, we would follow the appeals procedures. And
So to
establish
clarify, the
policy.
answer is yes, it can be appealed.
Yes.
Thank you. Do any other commissioners have questions of staff?
How much
Commissioner Aduca.
How much time? Thank you. How much time do you need in order to draft language that we could recommend to the board that would include some of these good suggestions?
15 minutes, maybe. But it would, again, I would want to consult with county council, and I could draft something, but I would be worried that it wouldn't be exactly how we would want to bring it back to the board.
So given that, is there any way that they can take their issues up with the board, and we, even though in spirit are amenable to some of their suggestions without having the necessary time and attention paid to it, it would be better to go with what is already recommended in a very technical document?
Yes, I believe you were take Director Ward's advice. We could take it in theory and prove it with direction to correct the appropriate section 8211-6C as discussed.
Commissioner McPhail, do you have any comments on that?
Commissioner Dukas, I can agree to that, because we'd be adopting what's already in front of us and not something that came in late last night. And if the board wants to adopt that language or suggestions, that's obviously their choice. So that was a good suggestion. Thank you.
Any other further questions of staff?
Yes, Chairman
Commissioner
White.
King.
Thank you. A few questions. Mr. Wright, one of the things you and I discussed yesterday was including in the definitions a definition of government code, because if you don't know that you're referring to the state government code, as a layman, you wouldn't know where to look. And so many of the definitions cite sections of the government code. Is that doable?
Yes, I believe it is. I'll defer to county council, but I do believe that we could clarify what we mean by government code and highlight which government code section we're referring to. Francesca, you have anything to input there?
No, nothing else.
Okay, that's one. I wanted to take note of something with all this discussion about conservation easements. In the event that there is a subdivision that creates one conservation easement and one non-conservation easement, the issue about surveys and monuments still is in play, because there is a lot line now shared by the two parcels, and that still has to be surveyed and monumented in order to achieve the final result, unless I'm missing something.
Yes, Commissioner King, may I answer your question?
Yes.
The non-conservation parcel would be field surveyed and monumented, so that line in between the non-conservation parcel and the conservation parcel would be established and easily identified in the field.
But it is the financial burden of the owner of record of the parent parcel, is it not?
Yes, it would be the subdivider would be obligated to do the field survey. And again, in some cases, it could be financed by the land trust that would be involved if they were purchasing that land. So it would be yes, it would be the obligation of the subdivider.
Okay. And then finally, although the issue seems to be resolved, I just kind of want to get my 2 cents in on the Ventura Land Trust letter. I did have an opportunity, thankfully, to review it prior to the meeting. I understand the issues both ways. I'm very supportive of the whole notion of, letting it go forward to the board and letting the commenter take it up with the board. But I just wanted to point out something that occurred to me as I listened to the discussion. After a long career in the YMCA and being associated with a lot of camps that are on open space and in what would be conservation areas, I can see reasons why a recreational and open space conservation subdivision, it would make a lot of sense to have those corrals. And so, I guess I'm putting on the record that I would support at least that much of a change. And with that, I have no other comments.
Thank you, Commissioner King. Any other commissioners wish to ask questions of staff? Okay, in that, I think we will need to open this up for public comment. The opportunity for the public to comment is through email. And the email address is planning.pccomments@ventura.org, 250 words or less. Please indicate in the subject line agenda item number 7. I also at this time, I think we'll ask for any public comments in general that normally would have been handled in the public comments section, so that we have those also sent to the county. So we will pause for 5 minutes to receive those emails. Check back. Thank you. Okay, welcome back. We're back live after our 5-minute pause to solicit public input. I understand that we have some emailed public comments. And so I'd like to have Anna read those into the record so we can all hear them.
Thank you, Chair White. We have received so far 2 public comments. The first one is from E.J. Remsen with the Nature Conservancy. Comment on 6C. When a conservancy acquires an ag property, it intends to restore restoration is not usually possible for several years. Restoration is expensive, requiring raising funds to do so, and often requires adjacent lands to be acquired to be successful. We have had a conservation subdivision approved that included a provision that the ag use must be removed within 10 years. It is very important to have a substantial period to allow for the conversion. I think 10 years is appropriate. And again, that's from E.J. Remsen with the Nature Conservancy. The second comment is from Brooke Ashworth with the Ventura Land Trust. To clarify further our comments regarding fencing, conservation parcels can be for multiple purposes. For example, the Walker Hearn Ranch will serve the purpose of both protection of biological resources and provision of public recreation opportunities. In that circumstance, internal fences can be useful for preventing the public from accessing the most sensitive portions of the property while allowing public recreation use of the remainder of the property. We would urge the Commission not to limit fencing on non-agricultural conservation parcels to perimeter fencing. We look forward to working with staff to address this issue further. Thank you for your consideration. And again, that's from Brooke Ashworth with the Ventura Land Trust.
Okay, thank you, Anna. Winston, are you still there? Will you respond to those comments?
I ran to my desk to create a screen. I apologize. I didn't hear the first comment from the Nature Conservancy about the 10 years. It came at the end of that. I apologize.
Anna, could you please read it again so Winston catches it? Thank you.
Yes. Again, this is from E.J. Remsen with the Nature Conservancy. Comment on 8211-6C. When a conservancy acquires an ag property, it intends to restore restoration is not usually possible for several years. Restoration is expensive, requiring raising funds to do so, and often requires adjacent lands to be acquired to be successful. We have had a conservation subdivision approved that included a provision that the ag use must be removed within 10 years. It is very important to have a substantial period to allow for the conversion. I think 10 years is inappropriate. Thank you. E.J. Remsen, the Nature Conservancy.
So speaking to a conservation subdivision that has already occurred, that I can't change. Though going forward, conservation easements and the deeds that are accepted by conservation organizations can be tailored with the current language to allow conservation, restoration work, and other activities to bring the property back to a natural state. And there is flexibility there. And much of the flexibility is left to the land trust, although the planning director needs to agree to those terms. It's flexible enough the way it's written to entertain that kind of request. I can't speak to the length of what was required to restore agricultural land to its natural state. For the Ventura Land Trust comment, we are suggesting to work with them, and I agree that interior fencing is appropriate in certain circumstances. So we would work with the Land Trust and our biologist and our county council to clarify that.
Okay, can we, you during the break, drafted up some suggested language for this thinking. Could we get that up on the screen so we all can see it and the public can see it?
Yeah, it's a suggestion on modifying 8211. Give me one moment.
Yeah. So Winston, this is Director Ward, we did type something up trying to grasp the concepts that we heard about. The second bullet is trying to address the biological preserves in preventing horsing and corrals that could be impactful of the resource. The second comment letter that Ms. Hall read into the record, I think, was also addressing the issue that you might have multiple types of uses within a preserve itself. So the suggested second bullet might not necessarily be in alignment with that public comment. But Winston, this is what we have if you want to speak to it.
Well, this is why this is
Commissioner
Nori Dukas.
Dukas, go ahead.
Thank you. This is why I think that with how many different interests there are, that instead of rushing this through right now, this could be something that they could deal directly with the board instead of having us right now grapple with it. I feel like we're trying to do something with, our hands tied behind our backs.
Okay. Okay, Commissioner McPhail, see you waving there.
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Dukas. And I have a little bit of a problem with the second bullet point prohibiting corrals and fencing in biological areas. They may want to fence off a biological area for a certain period of time to bring it back to whatever natural state. So I agree with Nora. Let Mr. Wright and the staff deal with the individuals and come up with the proper wording that the board can approve.
I would like to throw out another viewpoint is that I think the Board of Supervisors looks to the Planning Commission to hear these things and take into account public comments and come up with drafts of ordinance changes that are recommended to the Board of Supervisors. I know that this ordinance change has taken a decade or more, or close to it, a long time to bring it to this point. To me, it wouldn't matter if this was continued to a future hearing. I wouldn't suggest next week, but a future hearing so that these things are ironed out, that we nod our heads and approve the language and then pass it on to the board. I don't think it's appropriate for us to pass the buck to the board.
Chairman White.
Commissioner King.
Thank you. I just want to put my 2 cents in here. I happen to agree with Commissioner Dukas and Commissioner McPhail. And this commission has made recommendations to the full board, and often they've accepted them and sometimes they haven't. The fact that all of these comments came so late in the process to prohibit us fully and getting language shouldn't preclude us from taking action on the repeal and replacement of the subdivision ordinance as presented. An awful lot of work went into this, and I think that a reasonable compromise was offered by Commissioner Dukas and Commissioner McPhail felt that was adequate, and I want to echo that I also feel it's adequate.
Okay, hold on a second there. Hold on a second, Commissioner Rodriguez. Without objection, I'm going to close the public hearing on this and proceed to Commissioner deliberations. So,
You could, Commissioner Rodriguez.
Commissioner Rodriguez.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Getting some reverberation from Commissioner King. Listening to everything and following the dialogue that's been proposed, I'm in favor of moving forward with this. However, I concur that some issues were brought up that need to be looked at a little bit more. I think what Director Ward put in place here, his recommendation on the 3 items that were raised by the Ventura Land Trust Conservancy, I think, are appropriate for the board to consider if we go forward without any amendments to the proposed staff report. I do think that and concur with Commissioner McPhail and Commissioner Adukas that we can go ahead and that we ought to go ahead and move it forward. However, concurring with Commissioner King, we've done this before, and our final report to the board via Planning Director's Office has incorporated some of our suggestions and thoughts on an issue that they might consider amending. We've gone both ways on that. They've ignored and or incorporated into their final decision. So I think I would suggest we go forward with it with the comments and the addendum or amendment that the the Director Ward's staff would put together to accompany this final report to the board. And I think what I hear Barry saying is we'd be willing to go forward today to move it forward, with possibly the exception of Chair White, who would like to see it come back. I don't know if we bring it back, whether bringing it back in 2 weeks or a month is going to ultimately clarify. At the end of the day, we may be back where we're at, or with an amendment that the board will still have to approve.
May I comment to that?
Commissioner Dukas, you're up.
If we could get the bullets that were presented during the break, there's 3 bullets, one of which is other. I would strike other. And then the second bullet has to do with interior fencing. And we've already come across that there are different reasons for fencing for corrals, like for recreation that Commissioner King brought up, that for conservation efforts, there might have to be some kind of temporary fencing. I don't know if that is part of what would be considered fencing, but I'm familiar with temporary fencing that says, keep out of this area, we're trying to restore this. And I'm sure there's all manner of other types of fencing that really needs to be thought out and considered, and have language that's drafted that considers all of these possibilities. I don't feel comfortable doing it on the fly right now. It's certainly the rest of it, which is a huge technical document, 10 years in the making. We can carry that forward and have the schedule go on for the Board of Supervisors, and they can take up this very narrow but complicated issue in the future.
Any other comments from commissioners? Wave your hand if you'd like to speak. Commissioner McPhail.
Yeah, I agree with almost everything Commissioner Dukas said, but if we go forward with this, what is wrong with sending the bulk of this to the board and having that new language for 8211-4 and 6 to come back to us to refer to the board? We'd still be approving the bulk of their work.
Okay.
But I'm sorry, but I'm still a little concerned about just sending something and, the wording may not be what any of us want, but it's a done deal. That's just my comments.
Could we put up the bullets, the new drafted language on the screen again so we look at it? The second bullet says revised text to ensure conservation parcels for biological preserves would prohibit corrals and fencing, or would not prohibit corrals and fencing.
The Chair White, Commissioners, the intent from what I heard from your deliberations was to protect the habitat of the biological resources, so you would be prohibiting corrals and fencing that could impact the biological resource. It is not addressing the additional point that was raised from the public comment, where you may have multiple uses, and that would need to be looked at. So staff would need to spend a little time to understand the implications of that against the purpose of what the conservation parcels, Article 11, was trying to address.
Well, in my opinion, we want to do what we can to promote conservation and restoration. I'm on the board of Channel Islands Restoration, where the mission is to restore natural habitat on the Channel Islands. And I would point out that sometimes it makes sense to fence off a very special, maybe a pond or a creek or a forest or something to protect it. And I don't think we want to prohibit that kind of fencing. And so if we look at the second bullet point, I would insert the word not prohibit.
Commissioner White, members of the planning commission.
Who's Commissioner McPhail?
Yeah, the only problem I have with the second bullet is the word fencing. Corrals, you don't use corrals in a biological reserve.
Excuse me,
But
Richard, you need
want
to
to
mute
fence.
your microphone.
You may want to fence off
Continue.
a biological reserve like Commissioner White just mentioned. I would take fencing out because there's a lot of areas, even on some of our beaches, that are fenced off during certain times of the year so birds can nest in the sand. So I would take that fencing, that word, out and put maybe under fencing would be allowed when biological preserves need to be brought back to natural setting, or however you want to word it, because there are areas even in the county right now that are fenced off trying to bring things back to their natural state. And this would just absolutely prohibit that. And I don't think that's what the Nature Conservancy wants. That's my
Question
comment.
to Director Ward. After hearing the public comments in this last discussion, do you have some additional suggestions for wording here that we might adopt?
Thank you, Chair White. Commissioners, I'll look to Winston to assist on this, but the corrals would, if that is only focused on corrals, then that is protecting the biological resources. Fencing, depending on what type of fencing it is, could still have an impact to biological preserves. But Winston, if it's only a prohibition on corrals, is that meeting the intent of Article 11?
Commissioner White and members of the Planning Commission, the prohibition of corrals and fencing was intended to address long-term animal keeping on a property that might be sensitive. I understand your comments, and I believe there is a way to simplify the language in the subsection C to expand the use of fencing and for perimeter protection and biological protection and other reasons. So I understand your comments, and I believe a small amount of work in coordination and communication with the land trusts and other groups could clarify and make this more flexible and in fairly easily. But the fencing for protection of biological resources, that maybe there's a plant in bloom that needs to be protected, or a nesting bird, that's understood, or a creek corridor, or an area of significant, that's unique biological significance. Fencing of that would be practical and important. So I hear your concerns and I understand them, and I believe with a little bit of work, we can address all of your concerns. And I will make sure to coordinate with the Land Trust, Nature Conservancy, and Ventura Land Trust, and any others that may want to have comment before the board hearing. I wanted to highlight that modify section 8211-1, the applicability section brought up by Commissioner King, should be added to that modification, or the advice just to generally change and update Article 11 to address your concerns could be added to the motion rather than asking for specific language. Is that possible?
Certainly, that's possible. So let's. I think we're probably at a point of a motion. Is anybody feeling comfortable with proposing a motion to resolve this and move it forward?
I do.
Commissioner Adukas.
I would move staff's recommendations with the addition of whatever exhibits have been forwarded to us. Also, I would like to add a recommendation, besides the staff's recommendation, add the recommendation that was proposed by Commissioner King regarding Article 11. And with the exception of the bullet point that says other, the language that's proposed by Director Ward and Winston Wright.
Just to clarify, are you not including the Nature Conservancy recommendation?
No.
Is there a second to that motion, Commissioner Rodriguez? Commissioner Rodriguez, you need to unmute your mic. You need to unmute your mic, Richard.
Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you.
Okay, I second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Nora, will you please restate your motion?
Phil, you broke up. I couldn't hear what you just said.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Dukas, will you please restate your motion?
Yes, I would move staff recommendations and include the exhibits that have come in late, the public comments and the letter. And I would also like to include Commissioner King's suggestion regarding applicability with regards to 11 and the language that was proposed by Director Ward and Planner Wright, bullets 1 and 2, but not including the third bullet, other. And that's it.
Okay, a point of clarification, the bullet point 2, and let's put it up there again, as I recall, would prohibit internal fencing on a conservation parcel. Is that really what we want to do?
No. Now that I see it again. No, I want to take that out and just add the allow for perimeter fencing and omit bullets 2 and 3 until such time as they can be revised appropriately.
Okay, so you've restated your motion. Commissioner Rodriguez, will you agree with that motion? Commissioner Rodriguez.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Did you hear Commissioner Dukas's revised motion?
Yes, I would second. I have a question and a comment. Chair White, your mic is breaking badly on my end. And I see everybody else nodding also maybe. Anyway, I would support Commissioner Dukas's amended motion. I have a question, just an aside. Since we're talking about this perimeter fencing, if a situation arises where you have a biological area within a larger parcel that may need, that's defined later as needing protection, does the director, planning director, have enough discretion, ministerial discretion to make a specific exception to allow the fencing internally if that's necessary? That's my question.
Commissioner Rodriguez, this is Winston.
Yes.
There's not too much. Yes, we will draft language that makes it more flexible to clarify that fencing or protecting and preserving biologically sensitive areas would be allowed. I think there's some easy fix to, these land trusts know what they're doing, and we will make it clear that the easement language would be agreement between the property owner and the land trust accepting the responsibilities. The planning director would have to approve the easement language, but we'll draft the ordinance such that the easement can be flexible and address the numerous situations that would be encountered in real life.
Any other comments by commissioners?
I would just like to reiterate that while I'm sympathetic and generally in support of the suggestions that were made by the two commenters, that it's important to not let the perfect get in the way of the good. and their schedules. And I trust that this will all be appropriately handled by the board with the participation of these interested parties. And that if there are issues that come up, that everything will be noticed and people will have a chance to read it. And if there's more tweaks that can be made to it, this is something that's going to stand for a long time. It's something that's had to be corrected for 10 years, and it's a process. But it's important to keep an eye on the good rather than the perfect.
Thank you, Commissioner Dukas. Any other comments by commissioners? Commissioner McPhail.
Yeah, the only other comment I have on one of the letters is 10 years. Sometimes with the Nature Conservancies, 10 years isn't long enough. So I think that needs to be negotiated with them on really what's appropriate, because a lot of times they don't even raise enough money within 10 years to do what they want to do. It probably should read something like, until both parties agree that the time is right to completely turn it over to the Nature Conservancy or something like that. But I don't like the 10 years. To me, it's in a lot of cases, it's not near long enough.
Thank you. Any other commissioner comments? Okay, I guess it's time that we vote on this motion. Nora, Commissioner Dukas, we've had a request to clarify the motion. Please restate your motion. Thank you.
To restate it for the third time, I'd like to move staff's recommended actions with the addition of the suggestion by Commissioner King with regard to applicability in Article 11, and include the one bullet that was developed by Director Ward and planning staff.
Okay, thank you.
And
Megan, does that give you what you need? The first bullet. Just the first bullet, not the second and third one. Okay, will the clerk please call the roll on this motion? Aye.
One more time. Commissioner White, aye. No, Commissioner Dukas?
Aye.
Commissioner McPhail?
I'm going to abstain.
Abstain, all right. Commissioner King?
Aye.
Commissioner Rodriguez?
Aye.
Okay, let me just record that.
Okay, the motion passes. Next item on the agenda is discussion report by the planning director on board actions and other matters, and followed by items the planning commission may wish to introduce. So turned over to Director Ward.
Thank you, Chair White, commissioners. We appreciate your efforts in regards to our online hearing efforts during the social distancing and complying with the county's health order. As you can tell, we had some struggles here and there. We're hoping to get this running a little bit more smoothly as we progress, but we do appreciate your time. We appreciate the public's assistance as well. It was good to see that we did receive public comments during our agenda items today, so that is good news. As far as hearing upcoming items, we are looking at our calendar. We obviously lost the month of March, and so we do have some items that are queued up to come to your body. We're also addressing whether there's going to be any additional changes to the county health order and whether that might change the social distancing or the public hearing room. So at the moment, we have tentatively scheduled items on June 11th and June 25th. And these are a request for a conditional use permit, County Fire Station number 57. This is located at 3356 Somas Road. And we also have an appeal. Actually, excuse me, this is a deferral of a planning director's decision on a conditional use permit related to a new authorization of decommissioning and abandoning a water well and an installation of a new well. This is the Crestview Mutual Water Company located at 602 North Valley Vista Drive and 191 Aliza Drive, Camarillo. But we do have additional items that we're looking at and trying to identify how best to move those forward. Some of these have much more public interest, as been already indicated to the case planners and to myself, and how we would be able to do that through the process we've done today. So I have been investigating some other techniques that we might be using to help with that, knowing that we would have greater interest in these items than we necessarily had for today's agenda items. So we will be working with you on that schedule. As far as the Board of Supervisors, during the last 6 weeks, their efforts have been really focused on the COVID situation and addressing our county response. We did have one agenda item go forward. That was the general plan annual report. That is a status of adjustments to our general plan during calendar year 2019, including our implementation of the current housing element and meeting our obligations for the regional housing needs assessment. And we did provide that presentation. Looking forward on their calendar, we do tentatively had set for June 16th to take the subdivision ordinance that your body just reviewed. So that would be heard on that date. And we also have an item scheduled for June 23rd, which relates to getting authorization to apply for a grant. This is the local early action planning grant program that allows us to receive funds working on our housing programs, such as implementation of our current housing element and then our larger effort working on the housing element update. And those are the items I have for you today. Thank you.
Okay, now is the time for any items planning commissioners would like to speak about. Anybody have anything they want to talk about? Commissioner King.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me clearly. I think it's very important that we acknowledge the hard work of folks while, we've been trying to figure out how to do these remote meetings. Megan Botanica and Ann Hall and Dave Evans and Dave Ward have done yeoman work in trying to figure out the technology and trying to coach some of us technologically challenged commissioners. And we would be remiss in not calling attention to their great work and letting them know how much it's appreciated. Also, I'd like to thank the two staff people presenting today. They were kind enough to spend some time educating this novice commissioner, and when they do that behind the scenes work, makes our job so much easier. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Commissioner King. Any other commissioners wish to speak up? I want to reiterate what Commissioner King said. High five to the county staff for pulling this together. I know we had some glitches, but that's to be expected. I think we were able to get some business done today, which is wonderful. And if we have to continue doing this for a while, I think we can do it. Thank you all. And if nobody else has anything to say, without objection, the meeting is adjourned.